So busy news morning. There are so many places we could start, but I guess because I know we're all having a fairly intense week, that let's do the comparative study. Andrea, you are in the middle of a very intense story right now that NBC News is breaking around critical national security questions. So let's start right there. Tell us how you are, well, are you getting any sleep, and how you are working this story.
Have you met Andrea? She doesn't sleep.
Yeah, I know. Stakes couldn't be higher.
The stakes are really high. Within the last few minutes, the president has tweeted twice about us, including one, calling us fake news, comparing us to CNN, now saying worse than CNN, and in the last tweet suggesting maybe it's time to challenge NBC's license, given that cables are not regulated, but broadcasts are. So the fight is on, engaged. I was part of the reporting team last week that reported the fight with Tillerson, the moron comment, that followed up by just how the White House was affected by this, and the State Department, the anger of the president against Tillerson, the anger of the vice president, and the question now of whether Tillerson will stay or will go. We've seen a lot of reporting about who might replace him and why he might stay because of the upcoming China trip. But now today, a team led by Kristen Welker, Courtney Kuby, our Pentagon reporter, and also Carol Lee, our great national political reporter, reporting that one of the contributors to the moron comment was that in the meeting in the tank, the secure room in the Pentagon that had just preceded it, the president had argued very forcefully with his team that he wanted to increase the nuclear arsenal tenfold. Not modernize it as President Obama and other presidents have. There's a multi-trillion-dollar modernization program underway under President Obama that continues, but actually increase the numbers of weapons which have been reduced since Ronald Reagan. So Reagan, Bush 41, Clinton, Bush 43, all have had nuclear treaties with the former Soviet Union and then with Russia, continuing the reduction of our nuclear arsenal down to 4,000 from a high of 32,000 during the 60s at the height of the Cold War. And these are international treaties. Plus, with modern weapons, we don't need as many nuclear weapons. We have all kinds of other platforms in the triad. So this follows up on a trend by the president to want the biggest, the best. And this followed by a day his argument to fire General Nicholson, the leader of the Afghan troops, without ever having met him. It was in the context, this was July 20th. It was within days that you had the Reince Priebus departure, the Sean Spicer firing. We were, at the time in Aspen, I was interviewing General Dunford, who had just come from that meeting. On the next week, the president spoke to the Boy Scouts. Tillerson was back home in Texas for his son's wedding. That's when we reported last week he was thinking about not coming back and was talked by Kelly and Madison to staying. Kelly was not yet chief of staff, so there was a lot of turmoil.
This fuse has been burning for a long time.
Exactly, and we're not suggesting that it was that it was this argument in the tank that led to the moron comment. We don't know that, but this certainly was a big contributor to igniting. And just to say, this was a critical time, this 10-day period, if you look at the calendar, in the life of this White House.
Right. I mean, each of you in different ways, from different perspectives, have had these moments where you feel like you are wrestling with how to tell a story and how to think about a story that I think is unlike probably any of us have faced in our lifetimes. Dana, CNN too has come under tremendous fire for its reporting and how it has approached these stories. How have you handled that?
Look, it's not easy, and it's genuinely not a partisan thing. It is President Trump and his administration, the way that they operate is unlike any other Republican or Democrat. Now, that's why he would say he was elected, because they don't want to be like everybody else. They want to be different. That's fine if you really are going to drain the swamp and disrupt the institutions and deal with lobbying and all that stuff. As a reporter, one of the many things that is so frustrating and really, really tricky is when you have a story, and I'm sure you guys have dealt with this, that you have really solid sourcing on. You know you got it. And you go to the White House for confirmation or for a statement, and they say, it is just not true. If you go with this, you are going to be wrong. And it's not wrong, where in some cases, 2 days later, it actually happens, so you know that you weren't wrong, you know that you were right. And so how do you deal with the idea of going to, of an institution, the White House, the people who work in the White House, who, it's just my experience, I covered the Bush White House. If we had a story that they didn't want us to go with, but it was right, and we would go to them and say, we've got this, they would, unless it was a national security issue, which is a whole different question, they would generally say, I'm not confirming that for you, but I'm not going to call you and tell you that you're wrong. That's kind of the wink and the nod, right, in reporting. And that doesn't happen in this White House. So you're really in this, you're kind of in this pretzel.
Well, this is why we keep seeing, you know, it used to be you had a 2-source rule or a 3-source rule for a sensitive story,
right.
And now we're routinely seeing the Washington Post publish a sensitive story and have to say, we spoke to 18 people.
Right, and then you have the added, not just the White House spokesperson saying it's wrong, even though it's right. Then you have the President of the United States using this unbelievable tool, Twitter, to attack the organization. And obviously, the experience with you this morning is the latest example.
Well, so I want to talk about Twitter. And Mary Katherine, you've talked about when you have decided I am going to, you know, put it down. Yes. Tell me how you think about, especially since, you know, you've written eloquently about the outrage industry. Right. Which is, you know, it's been a very successful business model for a lot of organizations, including in media and elsewhere. And Twitter is as good an engine of outrage as we have ever seen in all of human history.
Yeah, when you first said, you know, how do you sort of deal with the pace of news these days? And some people do not have this luxury. I'm raising 2 kids on my own, and I am an unplugger sometimes. And even when the president is breaking news on a Friday night, sometimes I just walk away. And there are times where I do think, and I used to be very laissez-faire about new media and thought it was the greatest thing ever, and I'm a Twitter enthusiast, and I'm on there a lot. But in the wake of, say, Charlottesville, I was online, and it was my daughter's birthday. Did her birthday party, and then somebody tweeted me and said, well, now that your kid's birthday is over, it'd be nice to hear something from you about Charlottesville. And I just said, I don't owe this platform a statement. I'm not the president. And so I just walked away. I was like, no, this is not how this operates. And what I found was in that week that I walked away, I had these very edifying real conversations with my actual real friends, some online and some, because I come from a very diverse hometown, Durham, North Carolina, and I have a bunch of friends from back there who I could talk to about this. And those conversations were so much more rewarding, and it made me think about how much of my empathy I give away to strangers on Twitter, and how much of that I should keep for having those conversations. So that was just a moment where I thought, oh, there's a better way to do this. And I think that's part of what all of us are dealing with on a regular basis. When you said, when you asked backstage about like a really intense week, I do want to put this one out there for, especially with women, and so much of covering this administration and being in the limelight and doing this work is about this work-life balance and trying to figure out how to do everything. And I was invited to co-moderate a primary debate in 2016 in February in New Hampshire. We don't have to get into the whole story, but 4 months earlier, I had very unexpectedly suddenly lost my husband. I was 7 months pregnant. He died in a cycling accident. 2 months later, I had a baby. 2 months after that, ABC said, do you want to co-moderate this debate? And I thought, that's crazy. I should not do that. But then I thought, well, I got through that. I could get through this. And so I'm still actually in retrospect, because you know when you look back at your postpartum days and you're like, was I all there?
No, you weren't.
In retrospect, I look back and be like, maybe I should not have said yes to that, and I'm very glad I didn't go postal or weird on the stage. And the Trump factor is such a different factor when you're gaming out how people will respond to you. I didn't know if it would get personal. I knew it wouldn't from Kasich, but I didn't know with Trump. Later it did on Twitter. But in that moment, things went fine. And so I do think back to that week, or the tragic week before that, and think, I can handle this.
So this actually truly worries me, because at one point at the height of the trolling that we were seeing, I did a poll of our newsroom at Time about whether about how men and women in the newsroom handled the responses to their journalism on social media, and more than half the women said they had considered leaving journalism.
Wow.
Because of the level of vitriol and often violence, and the I am going to come hurt your children. I mean, I know where you live. Unbelievably ugly kinds of responses. And the men in my newsroom were shocked and enraged by this, and they by and large were not having the same experience. And ordinarily, I think we don't think in gendered ways about how we go about our work. We want to get the story, we want to tell the story, and yet that as a news leader really worried me about how, especially, NBC fielded a large team of young women covering the campaign who came in to a huge amount of this vitriol. So did CNN. Has this affected you when you see, or do you? My husband bans me from reading my notifications.
That's that's the deal, and I really try not to. If I read all the notifications, I would be in a fetal position under the covers and never get out of bed. Ever. I just don't. I
can
can't
barely
read it.
keep up with what I absolutely have to read.
Right.
Now, I am in the situation where I have a daily program plus responsibilities on the broadcast side for Nightly News Today or .com. So I don't have the ability to unplug unless I'm on some kind of vacation, and even then, not really. That's
I'm
kind
betting
of
you
the
don't
deal
vacate
that we
much.
have with all these platforms, with broadcast and cable and the online. I have the sort of disadvantage of not having had children, so I have other family obligations, though, and that I feel very strongly. So, but it's not anything comparable to what you guys have. What I don't read is the really mean-spirited stuff, and to what you referred to, the abuse that women experience online and in person in our business is appalling. Just read what Katie Tur has written in Unbelievable about what this woman, and we didn't reveal it during the campaign. It was quite obvious when you heard a stadium in Alabama shouting, epithets at Katie and the president or the candidate from the podium, demeaning and disparaging her and pointing her out from the stage, and we had to hire security, and at one point a Secret Service detail actually came and escorted her because the Trump reporters were in a pen. I was covering the Clinton team, and we were constrained in other ways. Mm-hmm. But the verbal abuse from the candidate and his followers in these large and often, open carry states is terrifying. Mm-hmm. So I can handle people calling me out and telling me how awful I look on social media. I'm a big girl. I can take that. And I also just want to bring up what we're now reading about Harvey Weinstein and the conspiracy of silence in the major industry. If you look back at what Tina Fey wrote and aired on 30 Rock 5 years ago, jokes about Harvey Weinstein harassing and abusing women, and how could this not have been known? It's just, so women occupy a special place, I think, in this world of multimedia, in which we take a whole lot and we just have to
Endure it.
And endure, but also support each other and speak out passionately about what women, and in my case, I had 5 really terrific younger women colleagues starting out in some cases in their career. Katie for the first time covering politics. So I viewed it, and also women from other media on the trail with Hillary, and I just viewed it as, well, I'm going to take the hit. I can do it in terms of fighting for access in the Clinton campaign and fighting for security with the Trump people. And
can I just add one thing to that, is that there actually is a sisterhood, a real sisterhood, at least in the in our business, where we kind of rely on each other to deal with this. some of my closest friends are Kelly O'Donnell with your network or Nancy Cortez with CBS, because we can relate to one another even though we're technically competitors on this level. And I think that says a lot about where we've come as women, because we don't have to be competitors, you know, with our sharp elbows to the nth degree, but we can also kind of, you know, really be there for one another. And Andrea has really helped lead the way on that.
And the women on the Hillary plane, I mean, the 3 networks as well as the others, the print people, we were all standing, the 3 network correspondents, we would be standing out on the tarmac at White Plains Airport in hideous weather, getting ready to do our morning shows. And we'd all run into the bathroom and try to get our hair together, sharing curling irons or whatever we had, while Nancy Cortez would be on the phone telling her 6-year-old, no, it's picture day, you've got to wear something proper. And
Exactly.
I mean, the juggling that went on, and this goes all the way back to Judy Woodruff and Cokie Roberts and I on the bus.
You set the standard.
Back in those years.
You did.
But it was really exponentially increased in this year because so many women were on the trail, and we just helped each other with everything.
I want to invite you all, because we only have very little time left, but I can't see. Yes, back.
Talking about sisterhood, can you talk about what role Kellyanne Conway has played in all this?
You guys look at me. So I knew Kellyanne here and there, acquaintances over the years, and actually looked up to her as woman who ran this polling firm and had created something that that was working to figure out what women responded to.
Exactly.
And respected her work and was interested in that. I also, I'm in my own sisterhood of like right of center Trump, like loudly Trump critical women, who, by the way, we all have a Facebook group where we're like just constantly like, what are you dealing with today? What are you dealing with today? And that is really helpful. But yeah, it depends on the day, and this is how I try to approach the Trump campaign. I'm very proud of her that she was a woman who led a presidential campaign to the White House. That was unprecedented. But there are times when I'm like, nope. And then there are other times when I'm like, okay, I agree with Kellyanne Conway. And here's the other part, and I think this is important for, we talk a lot about the president wasting his credibility, and it's important and I try to do this every day to remember that, like, I have credibility to hold as well, and to be really well-behaved, and not well-behaved, but to be accurate, and to be responsible. And one of the things I think we see is with someone like Kellyanne Conway, she can be such a lightning rod that I'll feel one way about what she said, and then people react so insanely to what she said or did or wore that I end up back on Team Kellyanne within like an hour and a half, because that's how Twitter works. So I do think I try to gauge for that and try not to go off the deep end when someone says something I don't like or does something I don't like. But I think that's a bad cycle we're in.
And she gets hit a lot more than the men who do exactly the same in terms of spinning for the president.
Well, this audience will get to make their own judgment in a little bit. In the meantime, we're out of time. I could talk to you guys all day, but thank you.
Thank you for everything.
Yes, thank you. A leader in media. Thank you.